Okay, good morning. Okay, so we are continuing. This is Torah Shabbal Peh today because I'm jumping off of the text of Rav Matal. He mentions that in Avodas Hashem, essential for the person to have a Rebbe in Avodas Hashem. And Rav Matal described the early relationships of Hasidim to their Rebbeim, or Talmidim to their Rebbeim that you had in the beginning of Hasidus, as well as in Musar, where you had Talmidim, students that were very aduk, very attached to, searched out after, and developed a whole relationship with the Rebbe. As Rav Matal is saying, this is essential in Avodas Hashem, that a person has a Rebbe. We described in the earlier shiurim what that was like then. It was very common for a Talmud who was seeking a Rebbe, what the search was like, what the journey was like, what the relationship was like. And now we've sort of shifted the discussion to today. What does it mean for a person to have a Rebbe today? In a Rebbe, and going to yeshiva, it's very common that a person begins to find a Rebbe. As explained, when someone begins in yeshiva, so you call your teacher a Rebbe. And the person who goes from grade to grade, so then the Rebbe of the next grade is your Rebbe. So that's typical for learning in yeshiva, even from a very young age. But at some point in the ruchnius life, in the spiritual life, and the person begins to gain a greater seriousness and a maturity, so then it's not just the Rebbe of the next grade that you call Rebbe, but a person begins to find a Rebbe. And sometimes that person could be a Rebbe for life. Sometimes that person is a Rebbe for a tekufa, for an era of life. And a person may be possible that person changes position, changes location. It could be a person sort of elevates themselves, and they may have a new Rebbe.
So people that I've met in Seattle refer to their Rebbe, and their Rebbe lives in New York.
Yeah, that's very possible. That person will find somebody in life that's will explain what some of the features are. A person will choose the Rebbe. The Rebbe could be anywhere. The Gemara in Makos tells us that it's so essential for the Talmud to have his Rebbe. The Gemara darshans, the Gemara learns from the pasuk V'chei achicha imach, that V'ratz el achas ha'aram el v'chai, says, and he will run to one of the cities and he will live. Speaking about the Rotzeach B'Shgaga, the person that kills unintentionally, so he runs to one of the cities, V'chai, and he lives. So the Gemara says, V'chai, when he lives, you must provide the killer with chai, with life. Whatever is life, that's what you have to provide the unintentional killer. So the Gemara learns from there that Talmud shaharag, if a student kills, maglin rabu imo, we exile his Rebbe with him. Talmud goes into exile, has to go to the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, and the Rebbe has to uproot his whole life, has to relocate and live in the city of refuge. Because for a student to not be without his Rebbe, that's not called life. So he may call it living, it's not life.
What about the other students?
So then they have to go with him. Because he's restricted. And you see, the one that kills unintentionally is restricted, he can't leave that city.
Right.
So he's in need of his Rebbe.
100 other students.
That's what the Gemara cautions. It says, be careful the student that you choose. Make sure that you choose, it's called a Talmud Hagun, a proper student. You have to teach a proper student for many reasons. It goes the other way also. So the person goes, oh, no, okay, Seder. So I don't have my Rebbe, so at least I have Google. I can Google things I need, right? Or I have my Svarim. That's not life. V'chai, the Gemara says, and he lives, you have to provide him with life. And part of life is that his Rebbe is there. Rebbe Tarfon said it about Rabbi Akiva. He said, Rabbi Akiva, kol haporish mimcha, porish mechayim. Anyone that separates from you, separates from life. These Talmidim, these Chacham, had an inner understanding of what it means to have a Rebbe. He understood what it meant. It's like we would understand that if a person, if you wouldn't eat, you wouldn't have certain things, and you couldn't live. And we can even broaden that. A person would say, even without having friends, even though technically you could live, there wouldn't be life. The person has to have friends. So everyone has certain things that, well, I need this, this I need for life. So to stay alive physically, everyone pretty much agrees on what those necessary things are. Beyond that, most people would agree that, without having this, say like friends, then that would not be much of a life. You could live on the earth, but it wouldn't be much of a life. So in Ruchnius, in living a Torah life, we broaden that. We say, well, without the needs for the neshama, you don't have life. Yeah, physically, you don't have life. And one of those things is that Talmud has a Rebbe. This is a recognition that without that, you can have a lot of things, but you don't have what's called chayim. It's called life. This is why Ritafan says, Akiva kol haporish mimcha porish mechayim. If anyone separates from you, they're separating from life. Because that's an understanding of what we have, an understanding of what life is. Chayim, which is beyond the physical existence and beyond just having social needs taken care of, but it means that the ruchnius life is taken care of. So that is v'chai, to live. And so certainly in avodas Hashem, in serving Hashem, for a person to really advance, it is a necessary relationship. As we mentioned, the Mishnah Avos describes Asay l'charav, Kinei l'chachaver, and another Mishnah says that you should be mamid talmidim harbe. So the Mishnah is describing different relationships that are necessary in Ruchnius. One is Asay l'charav, a person should have a Rebbe. Second is Kinei l'chachaver, a person should have a chaver, friend. And the third is that a person should have talmidim. Talmidim should have students. So we understand these to be not just nice things or good things, but essential. So today I want to describe a little bit of what does it mean, I think, for most people to have a Rebbe that's not of the type that we described before. That's where a person comes in contact with a tzaddik of such proportions that the appropriate response is a complete bittul, surrender. On the other hand, it's not just like a person's just rabbi, he's just a position of some sort, or even he's what you call Rebbe, but that's the Rebbe that you move from grade to grade. But a real relationship with someone that you can call Rebbe means Rav Shali, my Rebbe, my Rav, that I think is more relevant and real to where most people will find that relationship. Most. So I'll just discuss some of the important features of what it means into having a Rebbe. So first and foremost, a Rebbe is a guide in Ruchnius, in the spiritual path, and Avodas Hashem. To have a Rebbe means that one is looking toward another as a guide, just like a person would go somewhere, travel as a tourist, let's say, or a hike somewhere, and they would hire a guide. So the guide means that you're putting trust in someone to lead you to where you want to go. So the person wants to go somewhere, they really have a goal, but there's a recognition that I'm unable to get there completely on my own. I need guidance. So the person selects someone that they can trust to help guide them. Mesilas Yesharim actually gives this parable about the Chachamim. It describes the different maze gardens that royalty would have for entertainment, where they would try to walk through these intricate mazes to get to the end. Have you ever done these, hay or corn mazes with your children? So it's like that, and you have all sorts of twists and turns, and it's not clear where are dead ends and which turns take you to the goal. Mesilas Yesharim says the Chachamim, they know how to get toward the goal. They know which are dead ends, which are paths not to take, which are paths to take. They teach us the right midos, the character traits that are going to help us move along, steer us away from those that will tramp us and get us stuck.
You need a navigator.
That's the navigator. So they stand, he says, like, they have these mazes, people that would stand atop, and they see the entire maze from atop, and they can guide the person through. So the role of the Rebbe is the role of a guide. So I'll explain that a little bit more. What does it mean for a person to have a guide? What does the guide mean? So, first of all, a guide has to be able to, first of all, have the Torah principles very firm. If the Torah principles are not firm in that guide, so then that would be a faulty guide. Just like if you selecting a guide to take you somewhere, the guide has to have basic principles to keep you safe. So the guy just doesn't know the area, but he has principles, let's say, that he sticks to for safety. That's he'll be able to lead you properly because he's firmly rooted in those things. And it's not, well, He's just a risk taker. If the guide is going by himself and is just a cavalier and is having a good time, so that's fine. But if the guy is taking responsibility for people, so the guide has to be very, very disciplined to know the principles, let's say, of safety, and to stick with them. If not, then the person is not a guide. So Chazal say, for example, very, very high standard. Very high standard. Says, Kisifse Kohen Yishmuru Das, V'Torah Yivakshu Mipiyu. Says the lips of the Kohen will guard knowledge and seek Torah from his mouth. So Chazal say, Im harav doma lamalach Hashem tzavakos, yivakesh Torah mipiyu. V'im lav, lo. If the Rebbe is comparable to an angel of God, then seek Torah from him. And if not, don't. So it's hard to have to reach such a level. But I think the key word in that Chazal is im dom harav. The Rav is like. He's like. In other words, that the Rebbe is going to exhibit a type of character and type of behavior and a type of lifestyle that's doma, it's like. Then you should seek Torah from that person. So for the Rebbe to be a guide means that he has to be very firm in Torah principles. Means he can't just simply be knowledgeable, but there has to be a firmness, an allegiance, and a discipline to the Torah principles to lead the person. To have, Yiras Shamayim, so that he'll guide the person properly.
How does a student have the wisdom to be able to seek such, to recognize such attributes?
The student on his own may not completely recognize that. It may take time and experience, and also the input from others. Now, there's a person meets someone, let's say, for example, a speaker comes through town, right? And there's a person's a really great speaker. Okay, so the person's a very good speaker, so they can inspire. That doesn't mean that you make that person your Rebbe, right? That in selecting a Rebbe is a process that person has to be very, very patient with. And he can't be just taken by the external features of someone. So the person spends time. I think I heard it in another meeting from another tradition. Someone said, if you want to know if you should accept this person as a spiritual guide, as a master, see what his relationship with his wife is like. So the Rebbe, the master, they have to have certain things very firm. For the students, you're not just taken by the externalities. Right? You have to be able to understand, be able to discern things.
The example that you had with the visiting, somebody that you're very taken with their presentation or whatever, would they really be a candidate for somebody's Rebbe anyway? Because the requirement to have a Rebbe is to have sort of that one-on-one sort of bond that you're talking about, and that's literally impossible to have in a long distance sort of.
If such a relationship could be established, then it could be. So the first thing is that the Rebbe is someone that's very firm in the Torah's principles themselves, and therefore they can act as a guide, which means that they adhere to the halacha in a careful way. That one can sense the person as Yiras Shamayim. then the person can act as a guide. So let me speak now toward what the Rebbe is to the Talmud. As a spiritual guide, so first of all, that means that the Rebbe will guide the person in Torah. Is the primary way in which a Talmud is going to really advance is by learning. Without learning, there's no advancement. You can't skip over learning. Learning is growing in every single level. So a person can do all sorts of things, but if there's not learning, then there's not growing and there's not advancement. And therefore, the job of the Rebbe is to be a guide in learning. Now, so what does that mean? That means that first of all, depending on where the Talmud is at, the Rebbe has to be able to guide the Talmud in what they should learn. What should they be learning? What is the proper thing they should be learning at this stage of their development? Where should they turn their attention to? First, how should they do that? How should they do that? How much time, in general, with a limitation of time, should be dedicated to different things? The Arizal said as Talmud, he saw that was spending a lot of time learning what we would call the Nigla, the revealed part of Torah, like the Gemara, let's say. And he said to him, you need to be spending more time in the Medrash. So the Arizal, it could be that it is. The Arizal was sort of gazing at the root of the soul of the person, understanding what they need. But even without having that spiritual vision, if the Rebbe is going to be a guide, then he has to be able to tell the Talmud, he has to be able to understand what the Talmud would need at this stage. What type of learning, what area of Torah, time dedication, way to go about that. So that's the first thing. What to be guiding him in Torah. Now there's a second facet to that, and that is, as the Gemara says, Ein Adam Lomed Ela Ma Shalibo Chafetz. A person has to learn what they desire. Now, like every statement of Chazal, if you isolate it without anything else, then it will likely lead you to an extreme that is wrong. Because all Chazal statements have to be taken within the broad view of their other statements. And the mistake that people make is when they emphasize one statement to the exclusion of others, then you get an extreme and inappropriate and not accurate perspective. And that's usually how people come to any extremes within Torah. I mean, extremes, both being extremely liberal as well as to be extreme, we could say in a religious way, extreme. I use that word very carefully. It means not a balanced and true perspective of Torah. Comes from an overemphasis of a statement of Chazal that's not understood in relationship to other statements, and likely does not have a proper understanding of that statement itself.
Does it come from spending too much, it's sort of not balanced, like you were talking about, like spending too much time in one area and not learning, being well-rounded in their understanding of Torah?
Not necessarily. It can come from a lack of experience. It comes from a lack of experience and of learning. So, every statement of Chazal, where there are often very pithy statements of very, very deep wisdom, which have to be understood itself, and then they have to be understood within other statements of Chazal. The grave mistake is when one's isolated and emphasized at the exclusion of others. Then you have something that's imbalanced. The whole Torah is about tiferes, about a certain balance. And I use that word also very carefully. Balance does not mean compromise or mediocrity. Balance means that the things are done properly and accurately, and with certain measure and precision. So that's a whole entire different topic of discussion. But I'm just mentioning it now. Like in this statement, we should learn what they want. It doesn't mean, it's a sort of a free-for-all, find what you like and just get into it. So, if you like Kabbalah, so then get into Kabbalah. You like, halacha, just get into halacha. And then it's the exclusion of everything else. What it means is that every single neshama, every single soul has a certain like a portion of Torah that is their portion. And this is what we mean when we say V'sein chalkeinu b'sar zacha, give us our portion in your Torah. Our portion doesn't simply mean give us a portion. Let us learn Torah. Let me be involved in your Torah. It means our portion. Each individual, each neshama has a portion in Torah. It means there's a area of Torah that is very precisely aligned with the root of their soul, as the Tanya describes in the introduction to the Sefer. And that although the Torah as a whole is a match to the neshama, there are certain areas or parts of Torah that are aligned to certain souls more than others. And that is essential for a person to find that area of Torah.
So it's give us the portion of Torah according to our need, basically, our individual need.
But it's more than just an individual need. It's to what's aligned with the neshama.
That's what I mean. But I mean, give us the portion, the balance, and the focus according to what we need. Right?
Yeah. So taken with other statements of Chazal, it does not mean that a person simply invests all their time in learning that. Like a person, I like measures, so he just reads the Torah anthology. Right? That's not a path in Torah. A person has to be exposed to the shleimus, the wholeness of Torah. A person is in need of every area of Torah for wholeness. It is impossible to live a Torah life without knowing the halacha, because you don't know what Hashem wants from you precisely. You cannot fulfill the mitzvah of mezuzah if you don't learn the halachas of mezuzah. You cannot put on tefillin properly and fulfill the mitzvah of the Torah without learning the halachas of tefillin. So it cannot be to the exclusion of that. On the other hand, if a person would not learn the areas of Torah, I could describe it as panemius, let's say, and you would not understand the relationship to Hashem, wouldn't understand the kochos hanefesh, the powers of the soul, etc. So the Rebbe, as a spiritual guide, has to be able to guide in Torah. It means that they have to be able to guide the student in learning in general, but then in particular, what that student may need in particular, and that can always that could change. That type of guidance depends on the second point, and that is that a Rebbe has to be able to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the student, of the person. If a Rebbe is of the first type we talked about, let's say the person has Ruach HaKodesh, literally the divine spirit, then they don't have to know you at all, because they know you. They don't have to know your personality necessarily. They know you. They know to the root of the soul of the person. Like we had tzaddikim, like Ben was describing the Baba Sali, and many tzaddikim that were able to see to the root of the soul of the person. They can say what this person needs to do without knowing you. But if that's not the case, all right, I'm speaking of that type of Rebbe, then the Rebbe has to really know you. You don't establish a relationship. The Rebbe can't serve as a Rebbe, and nor should the Talmud turn to that person if the Rebbe doesn't understand the strengths and weaknesses of the person. So he has to have an understanding of what's this person's personality like, right? Where do they have weak areas? Where do they need strengthening in, right? What are their strengths? That is essential for the Rebbe to be able to know, to guide. So that in turn affects the first thing. For the Rebbe to guide the person in Torah, if it's the Arizal, so the Arizal can see to the root of the soul of the person that you need this. But if not, then the Rebbe has to know the person. For example, so you have, as an example, Gemara type of learning is a certain type of thinking. It's a certain type of thinking of the brain. You can very much develop in that. If you've never been exposed to Gemara type thinking, then you're missing out on the whole type of sharpness of thinking that you may not find anywhere else. And the more that a person learns, let's say Gemara, the more that a person would sharpen this type of thinking. But their brain, the gifts that Hashem gave them are varied. And some people have a tendency, strength in this type of thinking, and some don't. And as much as it could be developed, there are limitations of the mind. And there are some minds that are very geared and ready for this type of learning, and some that are less. So beyond what, let's say, a student would go through in yeshiva, which in a typical yeshiva, there's a very great emphasis on learning of Gemara, an overemphasis of it, or an emphasis of certain types of learning, of certain types of Gemara, may be detrimental to that student. And so the Rebbe would have to find a balance where the Talmud is exposed to the Gemara and is learning it, but not to an overemphasis where it's to the detriment of that student, because you are setting up that person for failure by constantly forcing them to do something they're not good at. Now, of course, that's a balance, because learning Gemara and understanding the process of the development of halacha and the discussion is essential. And to have a fullness and appreciation, a person needs to be involved in that type of learning. But to what degree, to what extent, and to which types, so that a person has to know. So the Rebbe has to be able to have an understanding of a Talmud to be able to give such a guidance. But even deeper than that is the Rebbe has to know that person so that they could guide them in terms of personal development. Personal development. You have to know strengths and weaknesses of the person to be able to properly guide the types and the midos. What types of avodah services are good for that person? Where do they think they could develop, and where could be a place where they're really just hitting a brick wall and then knocking themselves and knocking their head on the wall? What types of svarim are good for the person? And all types of areas of personal development, discussions with that person, and candid discussions of pointing out different things that the student may have to work on, requires the Rebbe to have an understanding of the Talmud. So, from the Talmud's perspective, you can't make that person one's Rebbe unless the Talmud has a good sense, this person understands me. Unless the person is of a Baal Ruach HaKodesh, you have a Rebbe that has divine spirit, and it doesn't make a difference, because the Rebbe knows what you need. But if it's not that caliber, then the Talmud has to have a sense, this Rebbe understands me. So the example of the person going through town, it could be not. if the relationship is developed and the Talmud comes to understand, this Rebbe really understands me, understands my strength, my weaknesses, my character, my personality, then such a person may be a Rebbe. If not, then the person is not a Rebbe. Person, you get inspiration from that person, you listen to that person's classes, but it's not a Rebbe. That's a person that serves as inspiration, which is a very great value. In all these things, as we're describing, it's like any relationship. You have to know what it is in order to gain from it. If you don't know what it is, then either the person doesn't engage in the relationship, and then you're missing out on it, or you engage in it in an inappropriate way, and then you could be hurt by it, or not really gain what a person can gain from it. Like in any relationship, I mean, in marriage, I mean, many people could be married, but you have to know the relationship in order to have a proper marriage. So, I mean, many people could be married, but the fact that one's married doesn't mean you understand their relationship. If you don't understand the relationship, then it's of very little benefit. It could be actually of detriment. But to understand the relationship is to gain from the relationship. And the same thing here. If Chazal are telling us that the essential relationship is a Rebbe, then you have to know what is the relationship. What is the relationship to a Rebbe? If not, then either the person stands outside of it and you're missing out on all the things that it's supposed to provide, or a person is in it in a way that it's not proper, it's not balanced, it's not appropriate, and ultimately, God forbid, could be detrimental. So that's why everything we're describing here, these are just basic ideas of how to understand the relationship so a person can really engage it the proper way. Third thing, the Rebbe has to have nisayon, which means experience. Many of the things that students struggle with is because the student does not have experience. Now, let me subdivide this. We could be speaking about a student that's very young. In that case, the person is just young in life. That the PSS and the Rebbe said that every single child from the age of 5 has to have a Rebbe. And he meant a real Rebbe, a spiritual guide, not just the one that is in the first grade Rebbe, the second grade Rebbe, third grade Rebbe. Every single Yid has to have a Rebbe from the age of 5 years old. A spiritual guide. Now, at a young age, the role of the Rebbe is very different than at an older age. At the younger age, Rebbes could be mentoring in a way that we understand what a mentor or often what a good parent will do. Because the young person has very little self-understanding, if not any, has no experience in life, does not know how to deal with issues, does not know the Torah. And so the relationship of the student to the Rebbe at a young age is a very, very certain type. And the Talmud is in need of the Rebbe in many, many, many areas of life. Many of these things a parent does, and a parent could do, and a proper parent does. Sometimes, though, in addition to, a Rebbe does. And sometimes the Rebbe is able to provide things that a parent cannot. It very much depends on the child's parents, where the child is, what the parents are like, many, many, many factors. But describing that the Talmud, the Rebbe has experience in life and is helping the Talmud, then it's different at different ages in life, at different stages. And the Talmud may need to turn to the Rebbe differently at different stages and different ages. So the relationship of a student to a Rebbe at a young age is of one type. And when one matures, it's of a different nature. But one thing that the Rebbe is going to be providing for the Talmud is nisayon, experience. Not just experience in life, but experience in avodas Hashem, serving God in spiritual matters. How to go about things. Just like a person that is an older person that's experienced in life and says, I tried this. And in general, this is a good thing to do. With this, what you're suggesting is does not work because the older person has experience. The Rebbe does that in ruchnius things. For example, a Talmud has an idea, you read something, so, I want to do this, right? So, it says in the Shulchan Aruch, it's proper for every person that fears God to be up at midnight and to lament over the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So he said, well, that's true, it's a good idea, but it's not for you. So the Talmud could read a lot of good things, but it doesn't have in the sun, has no experience in life, but how to go about that. He reads a story about a tzaddik that's davening for 6 hours every day. So, the Talmud gets very inspired, it's very beautiful. He wants to daven like that. So that's not necessarily what you need to do. Okay? Or the Talmud wants to develop certain midos. That's the humility. So the Talmud will do things that's perhaps not good for them. Right? It could be that the Talmud has to share some success and to feel proud of things they do. But in understanding humility, as they may do, they may think, I need to sort of conceal everything I do so that nobody knows about it and I'm not so proud of it. So the Rebbe might say, well, first we have to understand what it is, really what it is, and then guide the Talmud in how to go about that. So the student has a whole world of ruchnias that they learn about, that they read about, that they see others, and they start to sort of just do because, okay, they read about it or they saw it, and they just do it in any way that they understand is proper. And it could be far from proper in terms of should they be doing that? How should they be doing that? What's the balance of doing that? Is the environment to do that? It's 1,000 things. Without the experience of what is proper, the Talmud is totally in the dark. So that is a third and essential area of where the Rebbe is going to provide for the Talmud is experience, but not just experience in life, experience in ruchnius life. Okay, so pick up on these ideas as we continue. We can start to really contemplate, to think about the Rebbe and what does it mean to have a Rebbe, and what the role of the Rebbe is. So far we discussed briefly we discussed the idea that the Rebbe is a spiritual guide, that's guiding the person in ruchnius, just like a person would have a guide to take them where they want to go. The person's in need of a guide for assistance, so that they can go. They're going to go, but with assistance of another. And toward that, the Rebbe has to be very firm in the principles of the Torah, just like the guide has to be firm in the principles of safety, to keep the people safe. He has to be firm to that. So in order for the Rebbe to be a guide, he has to be firm in the principles of the Torah. And the Rebbe's guidance comes in terms of guiding the person in Torah, what to learn, how to dedicate their time, and then in understanding the student and what they gravitate toward. And that was the second idea, that the Rebbe has to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the Talmud, the students. And unless the person is the divine spirits, and they really have to know you. And that's from a relationship. You have to get to know the Rebbe, and the Rebbe has to know you, so one develops the relationships with the Rebbe, understands them. And then the third thing we spoke about is the Rebbe as having this kind of experience, not just experience in life, but experience in Ruchnius, so that they can guide the student in what things are really proper and appropriate, at what age and what stage, and how to go about those things. Because the student may read a lot, but that might not be proper in general, and it might not be proper for the student. So we'll pick up on these ideas in the Rebbe before we shift to the Talmud to sort of complete the fullness of this relationship. Okay, good day, good week.
But